Starting with the nature of adolescence, relationships with parents take a different form. There's moments with peers that become more intimate. Dating may occur for the first time, and possible sexual exploration and intercourse as well. The thoughts and ideas become more abstract and idealistic, also experiencing a little bit of mood swings. Adults now see adolescence as troublesome, less respectful, more self-centered, assertive, and adventurous, which is not a good thing for us because I know a lot of us are not like that. Most have a smooth path to adult maturity successfully, but of course, some don't. People like coaches, neighbors, teachers, mentors, and after-school leaders really help benefit the adolescents as role models, advocates, and resources. I think that we take people like that for granted sometimes, especially nowadays with what is going on in the world. We should really appreciate people like teachers, especially coaches, all of them, because they really do help us out a lot.
Puberty is one of the most important markers at the beginning of adolescence and is influenced by many things like low social economic status, adoption, absence of a father, child maltreatment, etc., which could all lead to an early onset of puberty. When puberty does start, it stimulates rapid physical changes, sexual maturation, and increase in weight and height. Some male changes are their voice changes, they get armpit hair, the increase of some genitalia, with a lot of other things. You see female changes are breast enlargement, armpit hair, the hips become wider than the shoulders, etc. And then some weight and height changes we see is in early adolescence, girls are usually heavier and taller than boys, but by the time or by the end of middle school years, the boys usually catch up or surpass the girls in both weight and height. It's also important to note that even though girls begin puberty, they don't usually have menarche until a little bit after, and even so, they don't ovulate for about 1 to 2 years after that menstruation begins. Boys usually begin puberty between 10 to 13 and a half and end between 13 to 17 years old. Girls begin between 9 and 15 years, but it is seen that U.S. African American girls tend to begin a little bit earlier, about 8 to 9 years old. Some important hormones to know are estradiol, which is a type of estrogen. This influences breast, uterine, and skeletal development, and it increases eightfold in girls and only a twofold in boys. And then testosterone, which increases is for genital development, increase in height, deepening of the voice, and it increases an eightfold in boys and a twofold in girls. Hormones also do contribute to the psychological development in adolescence. However, hormone effects alone do not account for adolescent development because hormones can be affected by behavior, mood, and social factors. During adolescence, we also see that the brain develops in a bottom to top up sequence with sensory, appetitive, sexual, sensation seeking, and risk taking brain linkages maturing first, and the higher level brain linkages, such as self control, planning, and reasoning, maturing later. We also see the corpus callosum, where fibers connect the brain's left and right hemispheres. This thickens in adolescence, and this improves adolescents' ability to process information. There is also advances in the development of the prefrontal cortex, which is the highest level of the frontal lobes involved in reasoning, decision making, and self control. However, the prefrontal cortex doesn't finish maturing until the emerging adult years, approximately between 18 and 25 years old or later. And at a lower level, subcortical level, the limbic system, which is a set of emotions and where rewards are experienced, matures much earlier than the prefrontal cortex and is almost completely developed in early adolescence. Adolescence is also a time of sexual exploration and experimentation where sexual fantasies and realities come in and you become very curious about sexuality. And at this time, they also become very concerned about being attractive. And how do they do sex, and what is the future of their sex lives going to look like. So during this time, they also develop a mature sexual identity. And in the US, information about sexuality is widely available, from TV shows and videos and magazines and lyrics and music and the internet. And from all of this, they also develop a body image. And universal psychological aspect is that adolescents are preoccupied with their bodies and they develop images of what their bodies are like. They also are more dissatisfied in early adolescence, but usually in later adolescence they become more positive. And it's seen that girls are less happy and are more negative about their bodies, which is mostly influenced from the media portrayals of like thinness. And then some adolescent problems we see is that for girls who start menarche early, they're more likely to smoke and drink and become depressed or engage in delinquency, and they have older friends and they start dating earlier, have sexual experiences earlier, are less likely to graduate from high school, and they even marry earlier. While maturing early in boys, they actually perceive themselves more positively and have a more successful peer relationships. So some sexual behavior problems is that usually they're not emotionally prepared for sexual experiences if they, begin early. So, and it's also risky because like they have risky behaviors such as drug use and, school related problems. Before 14, if you do the sexual stuff before then, increases in sexual partners, has a negative health behaviors and antisocial behavior at 18 years of age. Another issue is they don't use contraceptives or they use them inconsistently. So, and also do a lot of unprotected sex, which could lead to STIs. And the adolescent pregnancy is 82% between 15 to 19 years, and those are usually unintended. So it's important in adolescence to adopt behaviors that are going to better your future health. So like poor health habits are linked to early death, while healthy habits are linked to a delay in prevention of health issues. And it was seen in statistics showing that 1990, 11% of adolescents were obese. And then in 2010, 2011, there was a 21% of obesity in adolescents. And this is mostly because US kids live off fast food, which is a lot of fried food, which leads to them eating less vegetables and fruits. And they're also seen to be less active when reaching adolescence and while progressing through it. However, it's seen that boys are more likely to exercise than girls. Usually non-Latino white boys are the most active, and then African American and Latino girls are the least active. Some sleep patterns that are important to recognize is that oftentimes we find adolescents sacrificing their sleep to study, which leads to difficulty in understanding material that's taught in the class and struggling with assignments the next day. A Swedish study showed that a short sleep duration leads to absence in school, and short sleep duration and sleep deficit lead to a poor grade point average. And in the US, so the amount of people that got 8 hours of sleep was about 32%, but as they got older, that decreased. So in ninth grade, there's 39.9% of adolescents that got more than 8 hours of sleep. By 10th, only 33.5%. By 11th, 28.5%. And by 12th, 23.3%. Mary Karkskadon and her colleagues did a research that shows, given the opportunity, adolescents will sleep 9 hours and 25 minutes on average. However, they do sleep less during the week and usually make that up on the weekends. And then we also see that older adolescents are sleepier during the day than younger adolescents. This is due to a biological clock shift, which is about a 1 hour delay and is influenced by the delay of nightly release of melatonin. The top 3 leading causes of death in adolescence is unintentional injuries, which is the majority from motor vehicle accidents. The second is homicide, which is especially prevalent among African American males. And the third is suicide, which has tripled since the 1950s and accounts for 6% of deaths from 10 to 14 years old and 12% of deaths from 15 to 19 years old.
Adolescent cognition involves 3 areas in cognitive changes in adolescence. These involve Piaget's theory on formal operational thought, adolescent egocentrism, and information processing. Piaget's theory, adolescence developing power of thought opens up new cognitive and social horizons. Piaget's theory is a formal operational stage which is abstract thinking that is shown in their verbal problem-solving abilities. Adolescent egocentrism. Adolescent egocentrism is the heightened self-consciousness of adolescence. David Elkind states there are two components, imaginary audience and personal fable. Imaginary audience is shown in adolescents' belief that others are as interested in them as they themselves are. Personal fable is involving a sense of uniqueness and invincibility or invulnerability. This is usually shown in diaries. Information processing. Cognitive control involves effective control in the number of areas, including controlling attention, reducing interfering thoughts, and being cognitively flexible. Controlling attention is a key aspect of learning and thinking in adolescence and emerging adulthood. Self-oriented thoughts such as worrying, self-doubt, and intense emotional-laden thoughts may interfere with focusing attention on think tasks. Flexibility involves the ability to adapt to the situation. Decision making. Adolescence is a time of increased decision making, which friends to choose, which person to date, whether to have sex, buy a car, or go to college, and so on. Better decisions are usually made when the person is calm than when they are emotionally aroused. Social pressure can also play a role in decision making. Critical thinking. In one study of 5th, 8th, and 11th graders, critical thinking increased with age. Critical thinking skills are unlikely to mature in adolescence.